Hello, and welcome to the online writing tutorials brought to you by NAIT Academic Support Services. Today we are talking about sentence fragments and how to avoid them. If you're watching this video, you've probably been told that you have a problem with sentence fragments. But what does that mean? In everyday language, we usually use the word fragment to describe something that is a piece of something else. It's an incomplete part. In the context of writing, when we talk about a sentence fragment, we mean it's a piece of writing that is punctuated as if it is a sentence, but it is in fact incomplete. It's not a full and complete sentence. So in order to understand what an incomplete sentence is, we need first to understand what a complete sentence looks like. There are a few elements that must be present for a sentence to be complete. A sentence must have a subject, have a verb, and it must represent a complete idea. Let's look at these two sentences as examples. The first sentence says, Mary went to the store. We have the subject, Mary, the verb, went, and the idea expressed in the sentence is complete. The second sentence, I am Canadian, has the subject, I, and the verb, am, and again, the sentence makes complete sense. The idea is complete in the second sentence as well. Both of these sentences are examples of full and complete sentences. Now that we know what is required for a sentence to be complete, we can look at what factors might cause a sentence to become a fragment. The first reason why a sentence might be a fragment is it could be missing a subject. Let's look at these sentences. We'll do it next week. Here we start with the verb. It's missing a subject. Who is doing it next week? I will do it next week. We will do it next week. You will do it next week. See you in the morning. Here again, we start with the verb, and we don't know who is doing the action. Who will see you in the morning? I will see you in the morning. She will see you in the morning. Our third sentence, talk to you tomorrow, is also missing a subject. The second reason why a sentence may be a fragment is it could be missing a verb. In the first sentence, I running this morning, we're missing part of the verb. The auxiliary verb went, was, is needed to make the sentence complete. It should be I was running this morning or I went running this morning. The second sentence, where you at, is also missing a verb. Although this is a popular phrase in spoken English, aside from other grammatical errors, it's an incomplete sentence. It should be, where are you? You would need the verb are to make it complete. The same goes for the third sentence. A sentence could also be a fragment because it's missing both the subject and a verb. This is often a problem when people use prepositional phrases or idiomatic phrases. For example, on my way, off to bed with you, never in a million years, and phrases like according to Freud or according to Shakespeare. All of these are often written as sentences in students' writing, but none of them are complete sentences. They're all sentence fragments because they're missing both a subject and a verb. The last reason why a sentence might be a fragment is that it could be that it does not express a complete idea. These fragments are often related to certain sentence structures, especially those that have dependent clauses or relative clauses. If you're unfamiliar with some of these terms, such as dependent clauses or relative clauses, don't worry, we're going to talk about them now. If, however, you feel like you could brush up on your grammar and would like to review the various sentence structures, I would encourage you to Google simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences, and compound complex sentences. These are the four main sentence structures. A dependent clause is a set of words that has a subject and a verb, but it doesn't make sense on its own. Dependent clauses are used as part of complex sentences. The reason why a dependent clause, despite having a subject and a verb, does not have a complete idea is because it begins with a subordinating conjunction. Subordinating conjunctions includes words like while, after, because, although, as, whereas, even though, and since. Here we have some examples of dependent clause fragments. The first one says, because I was late. Here we have the subject I, the verb was, but it starts with the subordinating conjunction because. When we start with the subordinating conjunction because, it gives us that sense that there's more to the sentence. Because I was late, I missed my exam. We need to know what happened because I was late in order for the sentence to be complete and make sense. The second one, after I ate the cake, again we have the subject I and the verb ate, but because the clause starts with the subordinating conjunction after, it doesn't make sense on its own. After I ate the cake, something must have happened, and we're not sure what that is, and that's why this is a fragment. We need to know what happened after I ate the cake. While I wrote my essay, although I disagreed, again, in both of these cases, we have a subject and we have a verb, but with the subordinating conjunction at the beginning of this clause, it doesn't make sense and it cannot stand on its own as a sentence. Similarly, relative clauses can also cause incomplete ideas. A relative clause is a set of words that has a subject and a verb, and it contains a relative pronoun. Relative pronouns are words like that, when, which, whose, who, whoever, where, wherever, whenever, whatever, and so on. In the case of relative clauses, the relative pronoun can either follow the subject or it could stand in the place of a subject. These are some examples of relative clauses that are punctuated as sentences but are incomplete thoughts and are therefore sentence fragments. Whomever is late. Here we don't have enough information for this to make a complete sentence. The person who ate the cake. Whenever I read. The book that you bought. All of these require more information to have a complete sentence and represent a complete idea. Now that we've seen what can cause a sentence fragment, we can look at how to fix them. If you tend to have fragments because your sentences are missing subjects or verbs, we recommend that you read through each and every sentence and try to identify the subject and the verb of that sentence. What you can do is underline or highlight the subjects and the verbs to make sure that every sentence contains both of these. If a subject or verb is missing, of course you'll just add it to the sentence. For example, if I were reading through my essay and I found the sentence, "We'll do it next week," I would look for the subject and look for the verb. Of course, I find that we have the verb, will do, but it's missing the subject. So I'll add the subject, I, to complete the sentence. So our complete sentence will be, I will do it next week. If we read on my way, we'll notice that it's a prepositional phrase. There is no subject, there is no verb, and so we'll add both of those in. I am on my way. In the sentence, I running this morning, we would highlight the subject, I. We could see running. Running, of course, on its own is not a verb. It needs to have a helping verb, like went or was. So we would add that in and we would have a complete sentence. I went running this morning. Fixing sentence fragments that are caused by incomplete ideas is a little trickier. These types of sentence fragments are the most common, especially amongst native speakers. If you know that you have fragments due to incomplete ideas, what you can do is look for dependent clause fragments. You can check each of your sentences looking for the subordinating conjunctions, the key words that show that there is a dependent clause that follows. In order to fix a dependent clause fragment, the dependent clause needs to be connected to an independent clause, which is another set of words that has a subject and a verb. Most often, if you have a dependent clause fragment, you will find the sentence that completes the idea either before the fragment or after it. For example, if we were reading our essay and we saw that we had a dependent clause, because I was late, we look for that keyword, which is because, that's a subordinating conjunction, and we know now that because I was late is a dependent clause. The dependent clause must be connected to an independent clause to complete the idea. So we would read the sentence before it and the sentence after it to see which one completes the idea so that the sentence makes sense. In this case, we have the independent clause, or the sentence, I missed my exam, that precedes the dependent clause. If we join these together, we have a complex sentence, and this is a complete thought. So the correct sentence will be, I missed my exam because I was late. In the second example, after I ate the cake, again we have a dependent clause. We look for that subordinating conjunction, which is after. We see that we have after I ate the cake, and it doesn't make sense. We need another idea to complete that thought. In this case, it's the sentence that comes after that dependent clause that would complete it. So we have, after I ate the cake, I felt sick. You should note that when you're joining a dependent clause to the sentence that precedes it, there is no comma between the two clauses. However, if you're joining the dependent clause to the sentence that comes after it, to make that complete sentence, you will have a comma in between the two clauses. Similarly, with relative clause fragments, you're going to look for those relative pronouns, like whomever, whenever, who, that, which, and so on. If any of your sentences start with those, you want to make sure that it makes sense completely. If it doesn't, you'll want to join it to the sentence that comes before that relative clause, or the sentence that comes after. Let's look at the first example. Whenever I read is a relative clause, and it's a fragment. So we'd look for the sentence before and look at the sentence after and decide which helps to complete the idea. In this case, it would be the sentence after. Whenever I read, I get hungry. So to complete the sentence, you could add a comma in between them and have it all as one sentence. Whenever I read, comma, I get hungry. You can always also switch the order of your sentences or your clauses when you join them together. So you could change it to, I get hungry whenever I read. If the independent clause comes at the beginning of the sentence, there won't be any comma in between the two clauses. However, if you start with the dependent clause or the relative clause fragment, such as when I read, then you'll add a comma followed by the independent clause, I get hungry. The second example, we have the relative clause, whomever is late. This is a fragment. We need to look to the sentence before and after to see which completes the idea. In this case, it is the sentence before it. So we would join them together. I will mark as absent whomever is late. If the relative pronoun doesn't start your fragment, but follows a noun, you can look to see if you could add a verb to complete the thought. So for example, if we have the fragment, the person who ate the cake, and we need to finish that sentence, we'll need to add in a verb. The person who ate the cake is in big trouble. The book that you bought, we want to finish it, we'll say the book that you bought is interesting. So in the first example, we have the relative pronoun who, and it follows the noun person. Now here we've got the person is the subject, who ate the cake is a relative clause that's in the middle of the sentence, and we need another verb to complete that sentence. Likewise, in the second sentence, the book is the subject, then we have that you bought, this is the relative clause, starting with the relative pronoun that. So we need to finish that sentence by adding in another verb. The book that you bought is very interesting. The subject of sentence fragments is quite extensive, and these are just some tips that we hope will help you. If you need more assistance, please feel free to Google sentence fragments online, but you can also make use of some of our resources. We hope that you have found this video helpful and informative. If you have any further questions, or if you need assistance on a paper, you can try these free services that are available for NAIT students. At any time of the day, you can ask questions online or submit a paper to be reviewed by professional writing tutors through eTutoring Alberta. You can submit your queries by visiting the website through the first link on this slide, and students typically receive a response within 24 to 48 hours. You can also get assistance in person by attending a drop-in appointment with a peer writing tutor. If you visit the website on the second link, you will find the current schedule for drop-in appointments. Thank you again, and we wish you the best of luck on all of your writing assignments.